I just want to preface this video by saying that I don't really care for the first Last of Us title. When it first came out 7 years ago, I didn't even finish it. When I replayed it earlier this year to make the story timeline video, I found a new appreciation to a certain extent, but by no means am I emotionally invested in the series or the characters within. I also want to give one giant spoiler warning. I'm going to dive very deep into the story of The Last of Us Part 2, including all of the events that transpire within the narrative, so if you want to experience that for yourself, turn this video off right now and go do that. If you've avoided spoilers thus far, don't let me be the one to ruin that for you. Do note that this will not be anything like my story summary or timeline videos. I've been asked by several folks to make one of those videos outlining the story of this game, and I do plan to do that very soon. Rather than retelling the events of the story in this video, I want to examine the story. I'm going to pick apart the various story beats, character motivations, themes, and messages throughout to see if it measures up to the first game and if the criticism it's receiving from the player base is warranted. Namely, we're going to focus on Ellie's characterization, whether or not Joel's death is warranted, if Abby's story serves its purpose, the issues regarding Lev's storyline, whether or not the ending of the game makes sense, and the overall theme and message of the entire story. I do feel that although I've already stated that I have no stake in the Last of Us franchise as a longtime fan, I also have no allegiance to Naughty Dog or Sony. I can already predict that by defending certain decisions made by the storytellers, I'll be pegged as a fanboy or other far worse titles. This couldn't be further from the truth. I also want to note that while a lot of folks online tend to point fingers at individuals within the team that made the game, I won't be doing so. I don't care about a writer's personal background or motivation in writing a story. I just want to focus on the story they've told. While I know this video has been nothing but disclaimers thus far, my final one is that I ask you to try to keep your comments on this video civil. I made a video on the first game in this series, and ever since certain plot details about the sequel leaked online, I began to see some truly vitriolic, insensitive, and in some cases extremely offensive comments pour in. Remember that at the end of the day, this is just a video game. None of this is real life. It's fantasy. Disappointment in media is something we're never going to be able to avoid, and I'm looking at you, Game of Thrones fans, but we can still maintain a civil discourse about it without resorting to insults, slurs, and personal attacks. Alright, now, against my better judgment, let's get right into my analysis of the story of The Last of Us Part 2. The story picks up pretty much exactly where you'd think it would. Returning protagonists Joel and Ellie are living safely in a community in Jackson County, Wyoming, and Joel begins our story by telling his brother Tommy everything that happened in Part 1, including his decision to selfishly save Ellie from the doctors planning to dissect her brain to hopefully create a cure for the widespread cordyceps brain infection, and furthermore his lie to the girl about his killing the group at the hospital to save her, instead stating that they simply gave up and left. We can see that Ellie has her own personal doubts about Joel's recounting of the events, and this has driven a wedge between the two personally. This, along with the guilt of what he's done, have also taken their toll on Joel, who, in wanting to protect what he loved, ended up losing it in the long run. 4 years into the future, the player takes control of Ellie, meeting with her friends Jesse and Dina, a former couple who recently broke up. We learn that Ellie and Dina recently kissed at a dance, leading a fellow town member and bar owner, Seth, to make some disparaging comments, causing a scuffle between himself and Joel. This is our first look at a theme we'll also see later in the game: how LGBTQ people are treated in this post-apocalyptic world. While the writers briefly touched on Ellie's sexuality in the prequel comic and DLC of the original Last of Us, this event shows us that she is open and expresses herself in public to her community as an adult. The community, save for some, support Ellie as we soon see Maria, one of the town's leaders, intervening with Seth and having him apologize to her. Ellie's blossoming relationship with Dina is a topic of contention that we've unfortunately seen come up in the gaming community. Since the first trailer for the game released, showing the dance in which Ellie and Dina kiss, there's been cries of this game being some sort of SJW propaganda. These calls were later exaggerated after cutscenes from the game leaked pre-release, showing a new character, Abby, who is a woman with a muscular build, which led to many erroneously assuming her backstory and the implications that would have on the game's message. Before the game even came out, I was bombarded with warnings from the internet community that The Last of Us Part 2 was an SJW wokefest. But after personally playing and finishing the game, it's just not there. The Last of Us Part 2 is a story about individuals and their personal feelings, motivations, and actions, just like every Uncharted and Last of Us before it. One can choose to fixate on certain aspects of a character's backstory or visual presentation, but ultimately that's on that individual, not the writers. Furthermore, one can choose to dislike a story for a variety of potential faults, but simply having a character with a particular sexual orientation or gender identity should never be one of them. That's just ignorance. Shifting gears slightly, I want to address something, simply because it's the brunt of a ton of vitriolic comments I've seen online. All kinds of people can have all kinds of body types. Men can be slight, and yes, women can be muscular. One of my favorite video game characters of all time is Alexandra Zaryanov, or Zarya from Overwatch. Zarya was inspired by fan and employee desire for female characters with body types differing from the standard slim and petite, and thus she was created as an Olympic gold medal winning powerlifter. Notice how when Overwatch was released, nobody was up in arms about it being too quote-unquote woke, although we unfortunately did see that later. This must be because Zarya has a backstory to explain her bodybuilding and Abby doesn't, right?
Nope.
Abby is shown in flashbacks to have originally been much more lean, but she obsessively focuses on her training, oftentimes sacrificing her personal relationships in order to strengthen her independence and grow to be more competent in battle and harsh environments than her fellow soldiers. Here, the writers seem to deliberately paint a detailed picture to not infer any political message, and in fact ground the character within the world of the story. One can't complain about the message of a story when they're the ones putting those words in the storyteller's mouth. I feel I should note here that there is a storyline later that touches on LGBTQ themes, but the potential issues there definitely differ from the reactions of the game pre-release, and we'll get to that later. The reason I'm fixating on the public reaction to the game here is simply to point out one thing. Many of the arguments that have erupted over any political message behind the game were fabricated and blown out of proportion, often by those that hadn't even seen the game for themselves. I personally saw this spiral out of control into a bandwagon that gave many a platform to spew and then subsequently regurgitate hatred, where it was somewhat accepted because so many felt it, quote-unquote, ruined their game. This is dangerous and unacceptable in any community, let alone online where everyone is practically anonymous. A theme you're going to hear me bring up frequently in this video is, just because you see a lot of people say something, it doesn't make it right. This point is especially important when talking about actively marginalizing entire groups of real people over a video game. Inclusion of different demographics in media is a good thing, especially in this case. I'll let musician Shura say it for me. As if there aren't enough games with white men with beards killing shit. I'm not entirely sure what the primary motive behind Backlash to these aspects of the characters is, either malice or ignorance, but the hat I want to throw into the ring is, don't give it any credence in regards to this story, and especially don't go parroting it around the internet. If video games are art, as many claim they should be recognized as, then we need to treat them as such. Don't just listen to somebody online, take their words at face value, and let them tell you what to think. And yes, that includes myself. Art is meant to be observed and interpreted personally. Form your own opinion and don't let prejudices, either internal or external, cloud your vision. Alright, getting back to the story, at this point we meet Abby. She and her friend Owen, along with several others in her group, are members of the Washington Liberation Front, or WLF, and don't worry, we'll get to them later. There's some romantic tension between Abby and Owen, and we'll get to that later as well.
Trust me.
We learn that they're looking for someone in Jackson, and if you're watching this video, you know who. We then go back and forth between playing as Ellie and playing as Abby. Ellie patrols with Dina, eventually getting distracted where they find some old wacky tobacco, which they proceed to use and then get physical with each other. Sorry for that sentence, folks. Demonetization rules are pretty wild. Meanwhile, Abby is rescued from attacking Infected by a patrolling Joel and Tommy. These two paths ultimately meet when Joel and Tommy accompany Abby back to a house where the WLF group is staying. There, it's revealed that Joel is the one Abby's been looking for. She shoots him in the leg, incapacitating him, and the group knock out Tommy. Abby confronts Joel, who asks her who she is. She only asks him to guess before he delivers the best line in the game. Why don't you say whatever speech you have rehearsed and get this over with? Before Abby demands that they tourniquet his leg to keep him alive while she grabs a nearby golf club and takes a swing. Sometime later, Ellie arrives and tries to stop the attack, but is held down on the ground. Owen tells Abby to end it, while Ellie pleads with Joel to get up and asks Abby to stop. She takes a final swing and kills him before another WLF member spits on his corpse and they leave. And that's about it. This right here is pretty much the catalyst of all of the negative feedback about this game. And don't worry, I have a huge diatribe about it. This was the scene that leaked and caused the outrage, false narratives, memes, and general opinion of the game before it even had a release date. And quite frankly, I have my own strong opinion on the way the developers handled this delicate situation. It's fine. That's really it. It's fine. It's not groundbreaking or revolutionary storytelling, but it's also not terrible either. The Last of Us, the first one, is a post-apocalyptic western, with a lone gunman taking on a job of battling outlaw gangs as he progresses. The Last of Us Part 2 follows suit by continuing the tradition, but this time focusing on a different western subgenre, the revenge tale. In those films, the protagonist goes on a quest to track down those who murdered somebody close to them in order to exact revenge and retribution, generally by killing them in turn. After Ellie is forced to helplessly watch Joel's brutal murder, she now has a purpose, a motivation. We, as the player, are also motivated. Joel was beloved among the gaming community. Many regard him as a strong character who endured the events of the first game and came out successful, despite his missteps and selfishness. The player is meant to feel Ellie's emotion, and share her desire to pay Abby back for her actions. This is the story the writers decided to tell, but it's a story a very vocal group did not want. While I can understand not liking the way Joel died, it isn't necessarily told in a poor way. I've had folks tell me that Joel, a hardened veteran in this post-apocalyptic world, would never trust Abby, or her group, and would either leave her for dead or shoot her group on sight. This one point is actually directly contended by the game's writers, who left notes scattered throughout one chapter to show the inhabitants of Jackson had actually been actively fighting to regain their humanity, learning to trust strangers instead of just shooting them. I've also had several people tell me that Joel should have died a hero or sacrificed himself rather than being bludgeoned to death by a vengeful stranger. Many forget that Joel is not a hero. Joel doesn't deserve anything. He's selfish, he's merciless, and he's done some horrible things. Note that I said Joel did some horrible things. This brings up the dichotomy between video games and other storytelling mediums like film, television, and literature. In video games, the viewer, or in our case, the player, is directly involved in the events of the story. They literally take control of the character while they move the plot along. This begs the question: is the character responsible for their immoral actions, or is the player? Obviously, in the case of non-interactive sections of the game, such as cutscenes, the character acts on their own. The player can't be blamed for anything that happens. But what about during the gameplay? If the player is given the option to sneak past an enemy, are they morally obliged to do so, or is killing them acceptable? More importantly, if the player chooses to kill the enemy, is this decision attributed to the character, or the puppet master holding the strings? By my estimation, developers Naughty Dog take the approach that given the opportunity to kill their enemies, the player characters would do so. Because the narrative of their games is so linear and deliberate, adjusting to the player's individual decisions on an enemy encounter basis just isn't feasible. That being said, it's still difficult for a player to detach themselves from the actions that they are directly controlling. This, mixed with a fair bit of nostalgia, leads to forgiving and or forgetting the terrible things Joel has done up to this point, in the world of the story. In said gritty, lawless world, Joel is simply receiving his comeuppance from somebody he wronged. Even Joel himself recognizes this. Just look at his final words. He knows Abby has a speech prepared. He realizes what her intentions are. Joel doesn't even ask why she's about to kill him, because he already knows there's a litany of possibilities. Thus begins Ellie's quest for vengeance, and the story begins to take off at this point. Ellie and Dina follow Tommy, who has begun to head to Seattle to find the WLF and take them down. We spend a lot of time with Dina and Ellie as they travel through the city trying to track down Tommy, and we begin to see them grow closer to each other as they're forced to fight off several forms of opposition, both human and not so human. The pair eventually reach an abandoned theater, where Ellie reveals to Dina that she's immune to the cordyceps infection, while Dina makes her own revelation that she's pregnant with Jesse's child. Ellie steps away and we get our first flashback of the game, something we'll see a lot of. I want to note here that while these flashbacks are generally nice from a lore-building character development standpoint, they lead to a very weird pacing dynamic. At this point in the story, Ellie just got done fighting for her life, then gets a bombshell revelation dropped on her. But we immediately go back to a peaceful flashback of fun memories with Joel. It's not a huge complaint, it's just a little strange. Anyways, in the flashback, we find out that after settling down in Jackson, Joel taught Ellie how to swim, thank God, and he takes her to a nearby museum to celebrate her birthday. Here we get to see that after the Fireflies failed to create a cure for the virus in the first game, public perception of them shifted negatively. Back in the present, Ellie continues on her hunt for the WLF on her own, leaving Dina back at the theater to deal with her morning sickness. We see another flashback shortly after of Ellie learning how to snipe from Tommy, and later her and Joel go to a nearby music store to find guitar strings for her guitar, which Joel has been teaching her how to play. After it goes south, they instead share another personal moment, with Ellie still having doubt about Joel's side of the story regarding their leaving the Firefly Hospital. Even though Joel confirms his story again, there's a bit of a divide forming between the two. Ellie, in current time, meets a new group of enemies, the Seraphites, a self-scarring religious group that are also currently engaged in a war with the WLF over Seattle. There's a lot of backstory given to the Seraphites in the form of notes and artifacts explaining their belief structure and rise in power, but ultimately all we need to care about is that they don't like the WLF and the WLF don't like them, pejoratively referring to them as scars. Ellie reaches a hospital looking for a WLF member, or wolf, named Nora. She finds her and tortures her for information on Abby's whereabouts. We get another flashback here detailing one more confrontation between Ellie and Joel at the hospital she was to be studied at. She finds some evidence contradicting his claims and tells him if he lies to her again, she'll leave forever, but if he finally admits the truth, she'll go back to Jackson with him. He finally admits that he prevented them from studying her brain to save her life, and this shatters Ellie. She does still agree to go back with him, although their relationship is obviously completely fractured at this point. Ellie learns that Abby is likely in a nearby aquarium and heads there to find her. During her trek, Jesse reappears to help, and it's revealed that he was following her and Dina the whole time. After more traversal, the pair reach the aquarium, where Ellie finds two WLF members, Owen and Mel. In a scene mirroring Joel interrogating two of David's men in the first game, Ellie asks them both to point at a map to show where Abby is, and hope their answers match. This just shows that Joel lives on through Ellie, at least some of his negative influence does. When Owen tries to intervene, Ellie shoots and kills both of them, but as Owen lays dying, he reveals that Mel was pregnant, which Ellie walks over and confirms, much to her distress. A reunited Tommy and Jesse arrive and take Ellie away, but she leaves her map behind. Back at the theater, Ellie, Jesse, and Tommy discuss their next move before Tommy wanders off. Ellie and Jesse then hear commotion, and when they go to investigate, Jesse is suddenly shot in the head and killed, with his killer revealed to be Abby, holding Tommy at gunpoint, furious about Ellie killing her friends. She turns the gun to Ellie, frustrated that she had let the girl live, but she wasted it. We then go 4 years back and learn of why Abby sought out Joel in the first place. Her father was the lead researcher at the Firefly Hospital that was to study Ellie. In fact, it was him who convinced the Firefly's leader, Marlene, to even allow them to dissect her, despite Marlene's promise to Ellie's mother to keep her safe. After Joel killed Abby's father to protect Ellie, Abby found his dead body, taking away her only family and haunting her for the rest of her life. Her Firefly group was left fractured, taking yet more away from her as she was forced to move on, eventually finding the WLF. This event reveals the theme the story has been flirting with up to this point: revenge cycles. Joel killed Abby's father, hurting Abby. Abby killed Joel, hurting Ellie and Tommy. Ellie killed Owen and Mel, hurting Abby again. And now Abby killed Jesse and is seemingly about to kill Ellie and Tommy as well. If she does, who's hurt by that action, and what fallout will it beget? Therein lies the point of the game's story. Much like 1847 novel Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, another story that heavily focuses on the cycle of revenge. In it, a character named Heathcliff is treated favorably by his adoptive father, angering his siblings. When their father dies, his brother begins to treat him cruelly as vengeance for stealing his father's love. Heathcliff leaves their home, but when he returns, he acts solely to punish those who wronged him previously, as well as their heirs. He ends up getting everything he wants, but as we find out, this brings him no joy or solace, and he instead dies a broken man haunted by his torment while the world moves on without him. This is just one example. It's a tale as old as time. I only point this out to further explore the writer's intentions with telling the story as they did. As Mahatma Gandhi is attributed as putting it, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, and we'll have to wait to see where things end up. After Abby's flashback, we live through the same 3 days in Seattle, just as we did with Ellie, but this time from Abby's perspective. This is where we hit another main point of contention for those who complained about the game's story to me. They make you play as Abby to try to force you to sympathize with Joel's killer. I don't necessarily agree with the assessment that the player is forced to sympathize with Abby by playing as her, but rather they're just informed of her side of the story. As I've discussed, this cycle of revenge can only be displayed if we can follow both sides of the cycle. In the WLF Stronghold, a repurposed football stadium, we meet our new cast of characters that I won't even bother focusing on because they're really pretty tangential. We do learn here that Abby is highly regarded and well known among the WLF, even though she doesn't necessarily agree with their leader Isaac's advanced interrogation techniques. They also begin to feel the impact of Ellie's quest, retrieving several body bags worth of corpses, despite not yet knowing their attacker or her motives. Abby soon learns that Owen has gone AWOL, and supposedly shot one of their own to save a Seraphite, which leads Isaac and the rest of the wolves to believe he has defected to the enemy group. Abby then sets out to find him. It's at this point we start to visit Abby's own flashbacks detailing her relationship with Owen, as well as his own relationship with Mel, and I will admit that this is where the story hits a bit of a weak point. If told chronologically, this love story may have worked a little bit better, but considering the player at this point already knows the fate of Mel and Owen, it's hard to connect to them emotionally. Also, I feel their deaths would have had far more impact if we got the chance to get to know them before they're killed, much like with Jesse on the Ellie side of things. But no matter, let's see how things progress. We learn that Owen had found an abandoned aquarium and turned it into his home. He finds a yacht inside and plans to use it to find a group of remaining Fireflies that are rumored to be in Santa Barbara to leave the WLF and join them. He asks Abby to come with him, but she's a bit skeptical considering Owen's relationship with Mel and the various forms of jealousy that this causes. In the present, Abby is captured by the Seraphites and taken into the woods where she is strung up by a woman named Emily, who also brings forth another prisoner named Yara, a former Seraphite apostate, and Emily instructs her henchmen to clip her wings. They proceed to break one of her arms, but before they can break the other, she is rescued by a bow-wielding child revealed to be her brother, Lev. The pair then work with Abby to kill Emily and escape from the Seraphites. Over the course of the next day, Abby takes Lev and Yara to the aquarium and finds Owen and Mel, asking them to help amputate her arm to avoid compartment syndrome. Mel, a medic, agrees to help, but requires them to bring her medical supplies from the city's hospital. It's during Lev and Abby's travels together that we learn about their excommunication from the Seraphites. Lev, born Lily, longed to be a soldier like his sister, but was to be forced to marry one of the group's elders. Lev then shaved his head, a ritual reserved for the men of the Seraphites. While Lev's mother, devout to the religion, denounces her child's action, his sister Yara refused to cast her brother aside, and as such, she was to be punished with him, but as we saw, he was able to escape. I don't want to go too much into analyzing Lev's depiction in the story, and this is solely due to my lack of understanding in the manner. The fact that I'm a straight, white, cis male is not lost on me, and as such, I don't find it appropriate to put words into the mouths of a community. The same argument has been made for how appropriate it is for the writers of the game to depict Lev's struggles, and I mention it as food for thought. As I mentioned before, this is the other character whose background deals with LGBTQ issues, as well as how those in this world deal with it. The religious group obviously denounces Lev, but as most things in the Last of Us series, this becomes more of a personal story involving his mother. After Lev and Abby work together, they grow closer to each other as friends. They eventually retrieve the medication from the hospital, where Abby is rediscovered by the WLF, who arrest her after learning she's associating with the Seraphites, but freed by Nora shortly before her death at Ellie's hand. When the pair return to the aquarium, Yara's arm is successfully amputated and she heals fully. The next day, however, Lev disappears with the boat, having taken it to find their mother back on the Seraphites' island stronghold. The pair chase him and on their way encounter Tommy, sniping at a pinned down fellow wolf named Manny. Hey, remember him? He's the one who spit on Joel's corpse. Abby and Manny get to him, but Tommy kills Manny, so there's that at least. Abby throws Tommy into the water, and she and Yara are able to head to the island. There, they find that the WLF are launching a full-scale attack on the island, and the pair have to fight their way through both hostile forces to find Lev, who had tried to reason and make amends with his mother, which led to a scuffle resulting in her death at his hands. This decision was questionable, I'll admit. At this point in the story, Lev had already gone through a lot. Not even mentioning his entire life's struggle, he was forced to save his tortured sister by killing some of their own group, fight through hordes of infected to prevent her extremely painful death, and watch her lose her arm, all for her allegiance to him. It's just overkill to additionally make him personally responsible for his own mother's death. I'm trying to find the tonal or thematic reasoning for this additional trauma, but I'm finding it very hard to do so. There's no parallel with Abby or Ellie's own struggles. The closest comparison you can draw would be to Ellie and Joel's own disagreements that were never resolved, but at least that didn't end with Ellie killing Joel herself. Maybe they were going for a "the road to hell is paved with good intentions" message here? That even going on a selfish quest for good reasons can still lead to bad outcomes? I don't know if that holds any water. This, along with the fact that this never really comes up again with Lev, really leaves me scratching my head of why it was even included in the first place. It's like when you're padding out a book report because you need a minimum amount of words. Apparently Naughty Dog had a personal trauma quota they just hadn't hit yet. Moving on, Yara is eventually killed by attacking WLF forces that arrive with Isaac, who prepares to kill Abby and Lev before the Seraphites attack and kill him, allowing the pair to escape. Abby and Lev are then forced to escape on their own, and they reach a boat and head back to the aquarium. There, Abby finds the result of Ellie's rampage, the corpses of Owen and Mel. She finds the map that Ellie left behind, and she heads to the theater where our paths finally meet. Whew. So, moving ahead of what we saw as Ellie, we see Abby shoot Tommy in the head as he tries to get up, and our two protagonists finally fight each other one-on-one. While Abby gets the upper hand, Dina finally figures out something's going on, perhaps it was the 2 gunshots like 10 minutes ago, and intervenes, attacking Abby. Abby overpowers her and prepares to kill her, but Ellie begs her not to, stating that Dina is pregnant. Lev then arrives and Abby sees him and second-guesses herself. This is a major turning point in the story. Abby had already let Ellie go once and lost her lover and several friends because of it. Abby shouldn't care that Dina is pregnant at this point. After all, Ellie had just killed Mel, who was also pregnant. Here, Abby shows mercy that we would not expect her to. She's able to recognize that violence begets violence in this world, and through her friendship with Lev, someone who has experienced that firsthand, she's able to retain her humanity and walk away, leaving Ellie with a warning that she never wants to see her again. This is Abby trying to break the cycle of revenge, to leave the situation behind her without hurting anybody else. She lost everyone she loved in order to avenge one, and she knew killing again would cause her to lose the one friend she had left. Abby leaves Ellie and Dina behind and walks out of the theater with Lev, and we fast forward a bit. Sometime later, probably a year or so but never really stated, we find Ellie and Dina self-sustaining on a farm, raising toddler Jesse Jr. together as a couple. We learn that Ellie is still haunted by Joel's death, reliving the moment over and over, just as Abby did with her own father's death. This is exasperated by Tommy's arrival one day, revealing that he survived the gunshot which damaged his eye and part of his brain. He reveals that he had discovered a lead to Abby's location in Santa Barbara and asks for Ellie's help in finally avenging Joel's death since he isn't able to. She initially refuses, content with her current life, but Tommy begs before he leaves. After consideration, including remembering one of her last interactions with Joel, his standing up for her at the dance Seth insulted her at, Ellie puts on his jacket and packs up to go find Abby and finally finish things. Dina tries to stop her, stating that she can't let Ellie leave and keep worrying about her, implying that Ellie needs to either choose her family or her revenge. Ellie then heads off, leaving an upset Dina behind. It's at this point we see that Ellie wasn't able to do what Abby could, give up her revenge in order to keep her loved one. She goes off to Santa Barbara to find Abby, and we learn that Abby and Lev went there to find the Firefly group that Owen learned of. While they found the hideout empty, they were able to contact remaining Fireflies on a radio they discovered inside. However, as they left, they were ambushed by a local group called the Rattlers, who captured them for slave labor. Ellie finds the Rattlers' base and fights through to free the slaves inside, and learn that after Abby and Lev tried to escape, they were taken to the Pillars on the beach. There, Ellie finds an emaciated and sunburned Abby strung up on the pillar, left to die by her captors. Ellie cuts her down, and she subsequently rushes to free Lev as well. Surprised and confused at Ellie's arrival, Abby carries Lev and leads Ellie to some boats nearby. There, Ellie sees the blood on her hands and relives Joel's death one more time. She walks over to Abby and tells her that she can't just let her leave alive. Abby, dejected from what she's been subjected to recently, which could be taken as karmic justice for what she's done, simply states that she refuses to do this, which leads to Ellie threatening to kill Lev unless Abby fights to the death. The two then fight and a gruesome battle ensues. Ellie stabs Abby with her mother's switchblade, losing it in the water, and Abby bites off 2 of Ellie's fingers. Eventually, Ellie gets the upper hand and holds Abby underwater, nearly drowning her before seeing another memory of Joel, this time alive and well playing guitar. She then lets Abby out of the water, tells her to leave with Lev, then watches her rival sail away. Sometime later, we find Ellie returning to her farmhouse, now empty with only her belongings left behind. She picks up the guitar and tries to play, a task that's made very difficult with her new lack of fingers. She then thinks back to the memory she had of Joel while fighting Abby. In it, she visits him after the scuffle at the dance, and the two share a heart-to-heart, with Ellie revealing that while she doesn't forgive Joel, she wants to and will try to. This shows us that Ellie and Joel's relationship didn't end on bad terms, but Ellie was still robbed of fully mending it. She then puts down the guitar and leaves the farmhouse, walking towards the woods beyond. And that's it. Okay, we're finally done with the story, which means I can go on one last tangent before we actually wrap this up. This ending is the last point of contention amongst the online community, as well as a big reason people point to it as being bad storytelling. We spent around 20 hours following a revenge tale that ended without revenge. That's unfulfilling, that's disappointing, that's a giant letdown, and that's the entire point. The first Last of Us was a comedy, and I mean that in classical Greek terms, not that it's humorous or satire. While the characters fought through several hardships and moments of tragedy, ultimately they ended up with their goals fulfilled. While we saw Ellie somewhat disappointed, she survived and was set up in a comfortable living environment, with Joel keeping his newly gained surrogate daughter. This is more or less a happy ending. The Last of Us Part 2, however, is full tragedy. It forgoes a happy ending to instead focus on where the character ends up as a result of the storyline. At this point, much like Abby had, Ellie has lost everything. Ellie has lost Joel. She lost Jesse. She lost her group in Jackson. She lost Dina. She lost their son. She lost her only connection to her mother, her switchblade, as well as her only connection to Joel, her ability to play the guitar he taught her. And finally, she lost her chance to avenge all of this by killing the woman who set it all in motion. But she gained something: her humanity. Like we saw with Abby being convinced by Lev that she was better than killing Ellie and Dina, Ellie is similarly convinced not to kill Abby. However, her path is far more complex. Ellie spent years harboring a disdain for Joel, suspecting his lies and leading her to fixate on proving her doubts. When she learns the truth, she completely cuts him out of her life, losing the closest friend and confidant she's had up to that point in her life. However, she slowly learns to forgive. Had she just given up on her incessant quest for the truth, she would have never lost Joel's friendship in the first place. And if she had just given up on her incessant quest for revenge, she wouldn't have lost Dina either. The moment where Ellie began to forgive Joel is the moment she sees when she decides to let Abby live, reminding herself that she's allowed to grow, and most importantly, move on. Going back to Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff was obsessed with revenge until it finally consumed him, forcing him to live the rest of his short life haunted by it. Ellie was able to move past her obsession, allowing her to start a new life, one not anchored by her vengeance. It's here that we see the final parallel between our two protagonists. They both had to break the cycle of revenge. Without both of them choosing to give up their quest for vengeance, each would be cursed with living their lives in a never-ending battle of fear and anger. I like this ending in the context of the rest of the story, although many don't. If Ellie killed Abby, she still would have lost everything, but would have come out no stronger than the day she severed her ties with Joel. Joel would have died for nothing, which is what many believe happened anyway. While Joel's death wasn't heroic, it was still very meaningful. It took Ellie to her breaking point, but also brought her back from it, stronger than where she started. If Ellie simply killed Abby, she would have shown to have learned nothing from her final experience with Joel. It's entirely acceptable to say you didn't like this game's story, or that the first game's story is far preferable. I think I've made some fair arguments against many common complaints, and while I'm not naive enough to think they'll be universally agreed upon, the discourse is fine, as long as it's non-reactionary and well thought out. I've been waiting to say this for quite some time now, but now that we're here, I finally can. I didn't even really like this story myself. I kinda wish they had told a different one. I didn't even particularly enjoy playing through it. But that's my subjective opinion, which everyone is entitled to, and that's the beautiful thing about us humans. However, whenever somebody would approach me and tell me the story was bad or the storytelling was trash, they couldn't point to a solid, objective reason as to why that was the case, at least not one that wasn't solely opinion-based. Just because you don't like something or it wasn't what you expected, that doesn't make it objectively bad. It just means you don't like it. I didn't like the story, but I recognized what the writers were trying to do, and I appreciated the story structure and crafting. This is what inspired my creating this video in the first place. I wanted to take a personal exercise in critically analyzing this game's story based on the many opinions I've seen thrown around without much thought behind them. Even some opinions which I shared, I wanted to look deeper into. Well, that and I'm a natural contrarian. I hope that through this video, I've at least encouraged a person or two to not change their mind about this particular game, but rather how they form and share their criticisms of media in general. But hey, you could always just pretend it doesn't exist. That's what I do with Mass Effect 3. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Wow, this was quite the undertaking. I've never made anything like this before, and depending on how this does, I might make more. Let me know how you liked it in the comments. Let me know what you thought of the points I brought up, especially if you disagree. I'd like to hear what you think. If you'd like to support the show, you can click on screen or the links in the description. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you next time.